You did everything right. You went to school. You showed up on time. You stayed late. You didn't quit when it got boring, and you didn't take shortcuts when it got hard. You followed the advice that was repeated so often it stopped sounding like advice and started sounding like gravity. Get a stable job. Build credit. Be responsible. Be patient. And now here you are, years later, looking at your life, looking at your bank account, looking at the numbers, and something feels off. Not emotionally. Mathematically. Because no matter how disciplined you've been, no matter how many right decisions you made, the result doesn't match the effort. The numbers don't add up. You make a decent income. Not billionaire money, but respectable. Enough that people assume you're doing fine. Enough that no one worries about you. Enough that, on paper, you should be comfortable. And yet, every month feels tight. Every unexpected expense feels dangerous. Every plan for the future feels conditional. If nothing goes wrong, that's the quiet part no one says out loud. Your entire financial life is balanced on the assumption that nothing goes wrong. No layoff. No medical issue. No family emergency. No recession. Just a straight line of perfect stability in a world that has never been stable for anyone. At some point, you start asking the forbidden question. If I did everything right, why am I still one problem away from falling behind? This is usually where people turn inward and blame themselves. Maybe I should budget harder. Maybe I should stop enjoying small things. Maybe I just need more discipline. But here's the uncomfortable truth: discipline isn't the missing variable. The system you're operating in doesn't reward discipline the way you were told it would. It rewards timing, leverage, and positioning. And you were positioned perfectly to keep running in place. Look closely at the life you were sold. A steady income. A good credit score. A financed car. A long-term mortgage. A retirement account you're not supposed to touch for decades. From the outside, this looks like progress. From the inside, it feels like maintenance. You're not building freedom. You're maintaining obligations. Every achievement quietly comes with a new fixed cost. Every step forward increases the monthly pressure. And because it happens gradually, you don't notice the trap closing. You just adapt. Humans are very good at adapting to cages when the bars are padded with comfort. Let's talk numbers, because numbers don't care about motivation speeches. You earn, let's say, $80,000 a year. On paper, that's solid. In reality, after taxes, insurance, and basic deductions, what hits your account is much less. Now subtract housing. Not luxury housing. Normal housing. Add utilities, transportation, food, healthcare, subscriptions you barely remember signing up for, and the silent tax of inflation creeping into everything. What's left isn't wealth-building money? It's survival buffer. And buffers are not assets. They don't compound. They just delay disaster. This is where the illusion does its best work. You're told that stability equals safety. That debt is fine if it's good debt. That long timelines make big prices manageable. 30 years sounds abstract. Monthly payments feel real. So your focus narrows. You stop asking how much does this really cost? And start asking, can I afford this month? That shift is not accidental. It's the foundation of modern financial control. When you think in months instead of totals, you become manageable, predictable, easy to model. The most dangerous part is that nothing feels wrong at first. You're not struggling enough to panic. You're not free enough to relax. You're suspended in a permanent state of almost okay. That's where the system wants you. Because people who are almost okay don't revolt. They don't quit. They don't redesign their lives. They just work a little harder and hope next year feels different. Next year rarely does. Then one day, you see someone just like you make a decision that doesn't make sense. Same age. Similar income. Similar background. Yet somehow they commit to a financial obligation that, by every logical calculation, should be impossible. And instead of questioning the math, everyone around them celebrates the milestone. You feel the pressure. Not explicit. Cultural. Subtle. If they can do it, why can't you? This is how comparison becomes a financial weapon. It pushes you to stretch just a little more than is rational, because no one wants to be the only one standing still. Here's what no one puts on the billboard. Long-term commitments don't just cost money. They cost optionality. Once your life is built around fixed payments, your choices shrink. You can't take risks. You can't pivot quickly. You can't say no easily. You become dependable in the worst way, dependent on consistency in a world that thrives on volatility. The irony is brutal. The more stable your life looks, the more fragile it actually is. This is the point where people say, but what's the alternative? And that question itself reveals how narrow the conditioning has become. You're taught there are only two modes: reckless or responsible, struggle or settle. But there's a third path that rarely gets discussed, because it doesn't benefit institutions built on long timelines and predictable payments. That path prioritizes flexibility over appearance, liquidity over status, control over comfort. Imagine two people with the same income. One locks themselves into maximum obligations early, believing time will solve everything. The other keeps their fixed costs deliberately low and invests the difference consistently. For years, they look similar. Same clothes, same lifestyle, same stress. Then something subtle happens. The second person starts gaining leverage. Not flashy leverage, quiet leverage. Options. The ability to absorb shocks. The ability to wait. The ability to say no. Over time, that gap widens. Not because one worked harder, but because one was positioned to benefit from time instead of being consumed by it. This is where the math flips. Compounding doesn't care how impressive your life looks. It only cares about consistency and time on your side of the equation. When you're paying interest, time is your enemy. When you're earning it, time becomes an ally. Most people spend their entire adult lives on the wrong side of that equation, not because they're lazy, but because they were never shown the full picture. They were shown the monthly payment, not the total cost. The milestone, not the aftermath. At some point, usually after a scare, the realization hits. You're not behind because you failed. You're behind because the rules were incomplete. You played the game you were taught to play, and now you're being graded by a scoreboard that was never meant to let most players win. That realization is uncomfortable, but it's also freeing. Because once you see the structure, you stop internalizing the blame. This is the moment of choice. Not a dramatic, movie-style turning point. A quiet one. Do you keep optimizing within a system that extracts more than it gives? Or do you step back and redesign the rules of your own life? Redesigning doesn't mean rejecting comfort or living in fear. It means being intentional about what you lock yourself into and what you keep flexible. It means understanding that the real luxury isn't owning impressive things. It's owning your time, your attention, and your ability to adapt. Most people never make this shift because it requires patience in a culture addicted to immediacy. It requires being okay with looking behind for a while. It requires ignoring advice that sounds good but doesn't survive contact with reality. But the people who do make it rarely announce it. You just notice that they seem calmer, less reactive, less afraid of headlines. They're not chasing. They are choosing. If this is resonating, it's not because you're suddenly learning something new. It's because something you already felt is finally being articulated. That uneasy sense that the math of your life doesn't reward your effort the way it should. That feeling isn't weakness. It's awareness. And awareness is where exits begin. If you've ever looked at your situation and thought, I did everything right, so why does this still feel wrong? You're not alone. And you're not broken. You're just standing at the edge of a realization most people never slow down enough to reach. Before you move on, I want you to do something simple. Leave a comment with a word that only people who understood this will recognize. Just write "still running." It won't mean anything to outsiders, but it will tell me you see the pattern. If this helped you see the numbers more clearly, hit like so it reaches someone else who's quietly questioning the same things. And if you want to keep breaking down the rules you were never shown, subscribe. Not for motivation, not for hype, just for clarity. Because once you see how the game actually works, you don't need to run faster. You need to choose a different direction.